We're taking a peek into geek culture and sharing our top 10 fandom favorites. Let Your Geek Sideshow presents Geek Culture Countdown. Hey guys, this is Kitty.
And this is Andrew.
And we are coming to you live from the Sideshow Studios in Southern California. Welcome back to the Geek Culture Countdown. This week, we are getting our hands dirty to bring you the top 10 plant-powered comic book characters. Many of these heroes and villains have their roots in horror origins and strange science, but one thing is for sure, their superpowers are all organic. So, plant yourself in your seat and don't leave until we finish counting down these green guys and gals. Let's get started. All right, so this is a fun one today. We did cover, for long-time listeners, you may note a few similarities between this list and we did DC Comics characters whose powers are elemental. So, you will notice a few familiar names on the list, but we did get more Marvel characters in the mix this time. And those characters who made the DC Comics list may or may not have shifted up and down in their rankings. Obviously, some of the Marvel characters knocked a couple of other characters out. So if you're a really big Black Orchid fan, I'm sorry, but she's not on our list this time. But you can listen to the DC Comics characters with elemental powers for that one, if you'd like. This one's going to be fun, I think.
I'm really excited.
Yeah. It's very interesting because a lot of these characters have similar power sets. A lot of them are defined as chlorokinetic, which
is a cool term.
It's a very cool term. The internet thinks I made it up, or not the internet, but like my search engines and Word documents think I made up the term. But it basically means that they have control of plant life, whether that's down to the molecular level or just the simple, like, I can make vines whip out at people kind of deal. So there's a lot of different ways that it manifests through these characters, as we're going to see. So without further ado, I've got number 10 on the list.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's just jump into it. Number 10 on our list is Clara Prast from Marvel Comics, whose name I never want to say correctly because her name itself is a parody on chloroplast, which is a part of the plant, if you are familiar with biology and botany. She's also known as Rose Red, and she is a young girl from 1907 with the power to control and talk to plants, as she says. Her family discovered her powers when she was young. She was confirmed recently to be a mutant, but she's from the early 1900s, so they didn't quite know what mutants were at that point. Mm-hmm. I mean, they did, but people weren't as accepting at that time. So she was married off to a man who was moving to America. She's from Germany. And then she was later encountered by the Runaways team when they were time displaced in 1907 New York. She was brought back to the present day with the team because she was of similar age to Molly Hayes, who was Princess Powerful on the team. And because she was displaced out of time, her sensibilities are a little bit outdated, but she eventually acclimates to the new century. And her favorite plants to manipulate are roses because she says that they talk back to her. We never necessarily see the dialogue she has with plants, but the way that she communicates with them, she feels is talking to them. And she can control the movement of plants, manipulate their growth, and she has an empathic relationship with a lot of plant life, which means that if she gets too emotional, as young children are wont to do, it'll overwhelm her control of the plants, which then become very defensive. They'll lash out at other people or create like living shields for her, which is really cool and very interesting because it does lend credence to her talking to the plants, having a understanding of what they're feeling, and in turn the plants understand what she's feeling.
Yeah, it's really cool to think that every plant has a different personality. Because when you when you think of all of the chlorokinetics that are on the list, this sort of empathic connection is a rare one. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that roses would talk back the most with her. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea that, like, I don't know, maybe some of them talk with her more. Mm-hmm. And then others are a bit more feisty, like they talk back. They're like, I don't know if I really want to do that kind of move. Like, is that the right move for this fight?
Yeah.
I like that personality aspect.
And it's interesting then to think that it's not just unthinking plants that she's controlling, because a lot of these characters, especially the villains, are like, ha ha ha, I'll make giant vines that'll like kill people. But
yeah, a
lot of them, especially when she gets overwhelmed, and she does quite often as being a time displaced young girl, almost like a century out of time, she needs that kind of protection. And so some of the plants are protecting her, whether or not that means they're attacking other people or forming a barrier around her. And she does have that kind of fairy tale quality to her because she's her little hero name is Rose Red, and so we think
Right.
of the European fairy tales. Yeah,
But it's interesting because she sort of brings them to life because they'll act on their own when she's overwhelmed. And that's sort of different too than the other characters that I've sort of read through in preparation for this.
yeah,
That the plants get a mind of their own in a way. Just when she's around. And that's fun.
yeah.
That's interesting. It's more like a symbiotic thing.
Yeah, I was thinking as I was mentioning that she talks to the plants, I thought of the Lorax, who's not on our list because he's not a superhero.
Can he be the honorary mention?
Yeah, but he speaks for the trees. He speaks to the trees. So it is that interesting idea. And there's a couple other characters as we progress through the list, and we should jump on. There's a couple other people who've tried to talk to plants on this list.
Well, this next one doesn't entirely talk to plants, but a little bit more through. Number 9 on this list is White Mercy. And White Mercy is a plant-based life form like no other. She actually lives in the collective mind of a plant called the Black Mercy, which is from DC Comics. It latches on to people and then creates their perfect life in a dream and sort of traps them in there and then feeds off of their psionic energy, which is horrifying.
And that doesn't sound very planty.
No, it doesn't sound planty. It's very active, but it's very interesting because it is just a plant. It's, of course, an alien plant. You know, we won't find that going through any meadow here. But it's most famously seen in the Justice League animated series where it latches onto Superman and he lives his perfect life on Krypton with his parents and his 2 children and his wife. And it's latched onto all sorts of different heroes. Batman, where his parents are okay. Supergirl, also on Krypton, happy, right?
Yeah, and they did that in the live action series. And the storyline is titled the original one is For the Man Who Has Everything. But in the series they did For the Girl Who Has Everything. And it is interesting because you think those superheroes, it's like, oh, what could they possibly want or need for? They have powers, they protect people, they are superhumans among us. But then you see the Black Mercy shows that's not their perfect life. Their perfect life would be not empowered on Earth, but with a family on Krypton.
Right. And that's interesting that we usually only see through heroes what their deep desires are. But in the Justice League Trinity comic that came out, we got to see what a villain would want when the Black Mercy attaches to Mongol. And Mongol just has a dream of defeating all of the heroes of the Earth, just again and again. Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, Robin, just everybody, and then takes over the entire world, and even has a daughter named White Mercy. That's sort of a kind of real daughter that shows up with the help of Poison Ivy. And so Mongol manipulates Poison Ivy and White Mercy to try and take over the real Justice League in real life by trapping them in the Black Mercy plant. But White Mercy, through these dreams, sees what the heroes really care about and decides to help them instead of helping Mongol. And so she's got the ability to possess different people through the Black Mercy plant, and eventually she gets the power through really any plant she can kind of take over. And she can manipulate their dreams and kind of their thoughts. And so she kind of works with Poison Ivy in a really interesting way. I think she's really cool. Yeah,
and it's interesting that this isn't the first time that Poison Ivy has created daughters, kind of surrogate daughters out of plant life. There was a series a couple of years ago called Poison Ivy, The Cycle of Life and Death, where she had 3 sporelings, as they were called, and their names were like Rose, Thorn, and something else. I don't remember their names. But she created, because she can't have biological children of her own, she created like plant, I don't know, with the plant babies, essentially. Plant babies. I was trying to think of a very smart comic book science word for it, but there is none. They are plant-based babies.
Yeah.
And so she does have that, because she doesn't like humanity. But so to see White Mercy also kind of fulfills that role of a surrogate character, creature, daughter thing that she has created out of plant life.
Exactly. And she's so interesting.
All right, so back to characters who've tried to talk with plants to varying degrees of success. Number 8 on our list is Plant Man from Marvel Comics, not to be confused with Ant-Man. Plant Man is a man named Samuel Smithers, who is a chlorokinetic villain from Marvel, who was laughed out of the scientific community for trying to develop a device capable of communicating with plants. At some point, a lightning bolt struck his little ray gun, which he called the Veggie Ray, and it imbued it with the power to control and animate plant life. He then tried to take revenge on the Human Torch and Iron Man, among other heroes. And I'm not sure if this is actually still canon, because he's, Plant Man's just in everything, and we're just waiting for his Marvel Cinematic debut.
Oh, yeah.
He's had there's actually been 2 guys who were Plant Man, but in Iron Fist comics, it was revealed that Plant Man was given his gift of the lightning-infused Veggie Ray. The thing that gave it the ability to communicate with plants was from the Hilithri? I can't pronounce
rolls
it.
off the tongue.
Yeah, who are plant creatures from the mystical city of Kunlun. So that makes sense that they were in the Iron Fist comics.
Yeah.
And they were the original inhabitants of Kunlun before the humans forced them out, and so they wanted to take revenge. But I don't really think that comes up a whole lot these days, because that was a pretty bizarre plot twist. But Plant Man is most famous for creating plant matter simuloid duplicates. There's that. I was like, the Poison Ivy's plant babies aren't simuloids, but these simuloids are duplicates of himself that he sends out to commit crimes or do mercenary work to raise a little extra cash. And he has been a member of the Thunderbolts team, which is a notorious team of semi-reformed villains who do dirty work that the heroes can't necessarily do, but it's all in hopes that they will reform and become better people. But he has been imprisoned by S.H.I.E.L.D. on a number of bases. He's been broken out of prison quite often. And the latest iteration of Plant Man, who I think was in an Ant-Man comic, is a man named Paul, who himself is made of plants. So he doesn't necessarily talk to and animate plants, but he is plants.
He is plants.
He is plants. So that is one of the more strange entries on our list, but Plant Man is number 8.
Number 7 can also be plants.
You're taking my very, very eloquent wording.
I thought it was a good transition, and I'm rolling with it.
Thank you.
So number 7 is actually Mantis from Marvel. And we see Mantis, especially in the MCU, as this empath who can sort of tap into the emotions and the mind of people. We see her putting people to sleep. That's kind of her primary function in a couple different movies. But she can do a lot more than that. We have to remember, even in the MCU, they kind of hint at it. She's controlling really the entire planet, all of Ego and everything that's on there. She kind of has a role in controlling, because she can control plants. And so, for example, she's able to, put people to sleep and everything. She has telepathy. She's and she's also I keep forgetting this word, chlorokinetic. She's also a chlorokinetic, and she can slightly control plants when they're nearby her, but she can also become a plant. She can actually transfer her consciousness through astral projection into a plant and then make a plant body from it, in which her powers, especially controlling plants, her powers double. So she's just as durable, and she's just as good at fighting, because she's also one of the best martial artists in the Marvel universe, and everybody forgets that part. Which
Until it's too late.
Until it's too late. So she can transfer her mind to any plant, and not just ones that she sees. She can transfer her mind to any plant in the known universe.
Oh, wow.
At any point. So she can full on teleport. And not only that, apparently, in one comic, she literally came back to life, because even though she was killed, she just kind of got reborn in another plant. So she's got some crazy empathic connection with plants.
They don't call her the Celestial Madonna for nothing, and I do hope that this is my speaking it into existence, but for consideration of future MCU films, James Gunn, Marvel, whatever you're doing for Guardians Volume 3, let us see a little bit more of Mantis's kicking names and taking butt of her martial arts prowess, as well as her ability to because she was controlling an entire planet essentially.
Right.
The planet had a consciousness, but still, you think of all those lush alien environments on the planet of Ego in Volume 2. And that's something we just don't get a lot from her.
And I hope we get more.
Yeah. All right. So number 6 on our list has recently made a sort of a debut in the live action television series. This is Floronic Man from DC Comics. He's gone by a number of names, including Plant Master, the Cedar, and Floro. Floronic Man. Plant Master's pretty cool, but Floronic Man, I think that's a good one to stick with. In actuality, he is Dr. Jason Woodrue. There's a couple different origins for him, but originally he was an exile from a planet of dryads who was later reimagined as a world-class botanist and a notable university professor who taught other botanist characters in DC Comics like Alec Holland and Pamela Isley.
No way.
Yeah, and that invention came mostly with Neil Gaiman and kind of the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths. And spoiler alert for this list, a couple of his students might be a little higher on the list, and we'll explore how Neil Gaiman also kind of affected their stories. But Dr. Jason Woodrue is a humanoid who actually has a lot of he's humanoid, and his body is mostly plant-based, but he looks a lot like a human, at least until further iterations. And he's able to control and manipulate plant life, and he can physically merge with plants. He has been a villain against the Atom, the Flash, and Green Lantern. I think that's where I don't remember which match. It's one of those like matching puzzle games, like match the character to his. But as he fought the Atom, the Flash, and Green Lantern as Plant Master, Cedar, and Floro at different times before settling on Floronic Man. And then he later joined the Secret Society of Supervillains to combat the Justice League. And he's actually the character who uncovers the truth about Swamp Thing being an intelligent mass of plant life rather than everyone thought he was just a mutated version of Alec Holland. Like, oh, he fell into the swamp and then emerged, but that is still Alec Holland. He discovered that, no, that's just plants, but the plants absorbed the memories and personality of Alec Holland. And Floronic Man has a connection to the green, as most DC characters with plant powers do. And he once tried to drive humanity to extinction by forcing all the plants in the universe to overproduce oxygen, so it was going to suffocate all of existence. But Swamp Thing actually talked him down because he said, if you kill all the animals, they won't produce the CO2 that plants need to live. And so as the avatar of the green, Swamp Thing kind of used his balance to keep the peace between the green and the red, which is the animal force.
Wow.
Because if Woodrue had choked everyone out with too much oxygen, plants wouldn't have CO2 that they needed. So he backed down, but he's still a pretty bad guy. He's also seen palling around sometimes not palling around, but teaming up with Poison Ivy, who was one of his former students. But now they're both kind of hell-bent on eradicating human life in favor of plant life. So the Floronic Man is number 6 on our list.
Floronic Man is like powerful.
He
is. It really speaks to his power.
For a name that rhymes with moronic, and he's workshopped it a few times. He's still got to work on it, but he is a very, very powerful. I think any character who has a connection to the green. And he tried to have a further connection and kind of enter the Parliament of Trees, but he actually went crazy in doing so. He tried to ingest some of Swamp Thing to have a deeper, because Swamp Thing's just plants and hallucinogenic yams, but I'll tell you about that one later.
Yeah,
but
I'm eager for that one.
But he was unable to fully commune with the consciousness of the Parliament of Trees, and he went a little crazy. I mean, more crazy than he already is.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to another powerful plant character.
Yes.
Krakoa.
Yes.
Krakoa is number 5, and Krakoa is a little different than some of the other characters on the list. He's an island. He's an entire island and its whole ecosystem. He's every plant on it. He's all the dirt. He's even the humanoid and animal-like creatures that he can actually create, like just on there to interact with the people. And he's this sort of hive mind, and Krakoa is the whole island and everything on it, all communicating. And he's even able to shift and form his body in any particular way that he chooses to, all of the plant life, all of the animal, and he can make himself sort of into a humanoid form that is still the size of an island and can lift, I think the metric was 10 million tons.
Oh, for when you've got an extra 10 million tons just lying around for him to lift.
Right, exactly. You bring in the eggs with one hand and 10 million tons with the other one. So he's super interesting, especially because he feeds off of, or at least he has in the comic, he feeds off of mutant powers, which is crazy. And it kind of ties into a recent comic book that's come out.
Yes.
The House of X.
Jonathan Hickman and Pepe Larraz.
Oh, yeah. It's really exciting to see where it's going to go. But in the comic, Professor X and Magneto are working together to get everybody onto the island of Krakoa, which is kind of crazy because you think Professor X wouldn't take somebody to a mutant-eating island. And so, I've got a couple theories as to why it's happening because, of course, in the comic, they're producing these flowers that have positive effects for both mutants and humans. I'm wondering how it positively affects Krakoa and how he helps those flowers grow. So I kind of think that sort of hive mind is in on it.
Yeah, I picked up the first issue of House of X, and when Jonathan Hickman walks into Marvel and convinces them to cancel every X-Men book so that he can basically repave the way for the next generation of X-Men books. You got to listen. And I'm a huge fan of Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. It was also a film by Alex Garland. But that idea of the strange nature taking over, creating a new ecosystem,
right,
where people may or may not be affected by the spores, the growths. I loved in the movie, it wasn't in the book, Tessa Thompson actually becomes like a plant person at some point. She starts growing plants until she becomes this tree that just looks like someone sculpted in the shape of a human. So House of X was really exciting to see Krakoa take on this massive role because the X-Men have notably tried before to have settlements for themselves. There was Asteroid M, and then there was, of course, Genosha. But I'm fascinated to see now because Krakoa is both a mutant, he's a character, but he's a place. And he's been a bit player in a lot of X-Men books. He was even in the Mighty Thor. He was in the recent Generation X. But just as a joke where it's like, oh yeah, this island has a face. He's sentient.
Right.
But to see Krakoa become an ecosystem, he's creating the medicine, the specific drugs they can synthesize. That the deal is Professor X will only give them to humanity if humanity recognizes mutant rights and their separate nation island. So it is fascinating that he's a person and a place. And he's extremely powerful.
He's very protective too.
Yeah.
He's able to he's got telepathy inhibition so that nobody can sort of get in. So if anybody's trying to communicate with Professor X while on the island, they're safe, or if they're trying to take over. So I'm just really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah.
But let's go on to the next one.
All right. So number 4 on our list is Poison Ivy from DC Comics. Pamela Lillian Isley, also known as Poison Ivy, was originally introduced in Batman comics actually as a woman named Lillian Rose. She was Dr. Lillian Rose, PhD, who was persuaded to help steal an ancient Egyptian artifact that contained dried herbs. But when the heist was successful, her partner, who was another scientist, he was afraid that she would implicate him in the crime. And so he tried to poison her with the herbs, and then she emerged with an immunity to toxins. But as I mentioned earlier, Neil Gaiman rewrote her origin as part of the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths retcon, and it gave us the version of Poison Ivy that we know and love. Dr. Pamela Lillian Isley, who studied botanical biochemistry under Dr. Jason Woodrue. He injected her with toxin as an experiment just to see what would happen because he himself was crazy and always trying to see what he could do with plant matter and didn't have an affinity for humanity. But the poison nearly killed her several times, and it drove her mad and transformed her. And now there are from that point, even, we still get different depictions of Poison Ivy. Some are more human looking. Sometimes she's straight green. And that all depends on the level of plant versus humanity that the writer chooses to give her and the artist as well. In some iterations, she breathes carbon dioxide and she has aloe for blood and chlorophyll for skin. which does align her more with the Mother Nature type green
Right.
goddess. She considers herself an eco-terrorist of global importance, and she is known for her crimes against humanity with regards to the survival of plant life. She believes that Mother Nature will overtake, but sometimes the process needs a little kick in the heel to get the plants to grow back over Gotham and take out the nasty humans. And she has a superhuman immune system, but herself is poisonous to the touch, depending on which iteration of her we are seeing. And as recently as Heroes in Crisis, which was one of the latest DC Comics events, she was reborn, and she may potentially be a new avatar for the Green or of the Green. She was killed in the Crisis. DC loves their Crisis storylines,
Right.
but in Heroes in Crisis, she can control plant life, but she was reborn and now has this kind of, she's a green body that looks like a flayed human body. Like you can see all the musculature, but so kind of almost reminiscent of Swamp Thing's physiology, because you can see the musculature of Swamp Thing.
Right.
But she is a nude, like she doesn't have feminine attributes. She's like a nude, flayed body. Which is fascinating. And it's been yet to be explored, but people think that she may be closer to the Green because of the fact that she was killed and then returned to the soil and then grew back out of it. But Poison Ivy is a fantastic character. She's personally probably my favorite DC Comics character, even over a lot of the heroes.
She's amazing.
She is. And my first exposure to the character was Uma Thurman's appearance in Batman and Robin. So the fact that I stuck around is saying something. No, she's just a fantastic character, very interesting. And she, I just love her utter disdain for human life. And she's a doctor still, and sometimes she does care, especially when it comes to Poison Ivy. And she made her plant babies, and she's given Harley immunity to toxins in a lot of different depictions in the animated series and in the comics. So she doesn't hate all of humanity blanketly, but they're not her favorite. She would much rather be around plants and all of that.
Yeah, and there is some sort of like feeling of justice that you get when you watch her storylines, because like we humans have done a lot, So like when you follow along with Poison Ivy, when I read or when I watch or whenever there's Poison Ivy anything, I go along with the story. And sometimes she feels like the hero to me in like a weird way.
Yeah.
Until she starts doing terrible things. But like wanting nature to prevail, we all want Mother Nature to be happy.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how she pulls you along for that emotional journey.
Yeah, because there is that understanding that beyond our fleeting human consciousness, not to get too deep on you guys, but beyond our fleeting human consciousness, we know that the earth will outlast us.
Yeah.
In whatever form it does. We're supposed to be good stewards. We're supposed to be taking care of the earth. So she's just giving us a harsh reminder that we're supposed to be taking care of the earth with what little time we have on it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about number 3 here.
And I think number 3 and number 2, not to get ahead, number 3 and number 2 are very interesting to have paired back to back.
Yeah, we could do both.
No, just you. I mean, we obviously have to go. We can't, guys. We're gonna do number 2 before number 3. No, but just prepare yourself from just seeding the idea. Ha ha ha.
Some comparison.
Oh, sorry, that was bad. But yeah, there are some interesting comparisons to be drawn.
So number 3 is Man-Thing. And Man-Thing was Dr. Ted Sallis, who was once just a biochemistry professor when he was recruited by the United States government to make a second super soldier serum. And the serum had failed countless times before, and should have failed for him too, but in the weird, frantic situation in which he injected the super serum that he made into himself, he crashed his car and fell into a magical swamp, for lack of a better way to put it. He fell into a magical swamp that transformed him into the Man-Thing, full of nature's mighty powers. And so...
Is that his tagline?
That's full of nature's mighty powers. No. But he's made of swamp and everything that's in it, and he can regenerate from swamp and any swamp that's around. Really all plant life he can interact with in really interesting ways. And a lot of it is this very sort of what we talked about, this sort of viney reaching out and grabbing thing.
Mm-hmm. He has that very specific face with like the 3 kind of prongs hanging down.
Yeah.
He's a very interesting designed character.
Yeah. It's I'm blanking. It's based off of that large green myth, and I'm blanking on the name. Wow.
See, I'm just thinking of the Heap, who was another comic book character like in the 40s or 50s.
That's the one.
The Heap? Okay.
Yeah, he was also sort of based off of the Heap. Thank you for that. So something very interesting about Man-Thing. When Man-Thing was created, Dr. Salus's brain kind of spread out all throughout the Man-Thing and all throughout his swamp body so that he doesn't have the same mind or thoughts that the old Ted Sallis used to have. He's become an entirely new creature, and he doesn't think in the same way, but he does still have a perception of human emotions, if not an amplified version because of his new form. He's an incredible empath that can deeply understand the emotions of humans. And it's sort of backwards from some of the other characters that are like, human or organic life. Nope, that's not what I'm trying to say.
This just in, plants are robots.
Humans that can understand plants. He's more of a swamp plant thing that can understand humans, and they're
a swamp thing. You say?
Oh boy, licensing errors. But he can understand humans and their emotions, and when he senses anger or when he senses violence, he responds with this corrosive acid that he sort of secretes and lets out. And so he works with people, and he does have an intelligence still, but it's very emotionally driven. And I like that.
Yeah.
I like the sort of simplicity of that.
Yeah.
Of the swamp.
Thing.
Guy. The Man-Thing.
The swamp guy. And a fun thing is he hasn't been super prominent. He was really big kind of when Marvel was doing their Strange Tales, all the Kirby monsters and just those types of creature things before they really, really buckled down on the Cape comics. But Man-Thing recently kind of got a new little bit of a lease on life with Jason Aaron's The Avengers series going on right now, because Blade, there's a War of the Vampires storyline going on right now because there are so many vampires in the Marvel universe, and who could help create infinite wooden stakes but Man-Thing. But actually Blade regrew a small amount of Man-Thing from basically compost scraps.
Right.
And right now he's called Boy Thing. So Boy Thing, which just doesn't have the same ring to it, but Boy Thing pals around with Blade creating wooden stakes that go basically in like those bullet belts that like you see the Punisher wearing and like blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Blade
it was what?
Blah, blah, blah. That's what it sounds like.
Good. Yeah.
Oh my God. So he helps Blade fight the vampires, and that storyline is kind of on the back burner right now, literally, because the War of the Ghost Riders is happening, but and they're all challenging each other for the throne of hell. But it was kind of cool to see the ways in which Man-Thing can make other appearances, and he can appear, and so he's regrown as Boy Thing, which is so cute.
It's kind of cute.
Kind of cute.
With the little blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, with little blah, blah, blah. Because he's an infinite source of wooden stakes, so vampires beware. So number 2 on our list, this one's a little bit of a twofer because we couldn't have one without the other, but compared with Man-Thing, number 2 on our list is Swamp Thing. And now the funny part is, most people usually it's a chicken and the egg situation. A lot of people go, which came first, Man-Thing, Swamp Thing? Most people would be inclined to believe that Swamp Thing came first, but technically in the publication schedule, Man-Thing came out in May of 71, and Swamp Thing came out in July of 71 in the House of Secrets DC storyline. And he was created by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson, who both were like, we had no idea how similar the stories between Man-Thing and Swamp Thing were.
Yeah.
But if you know anything about comic book publication and development, this wasn't they saw the issue in May, spent the entire month of June making the DC Comics version. That's just not how it works. So it's fascinating to see that they were both kind of inspired by the Heap, and what kind of other storytelling was going on at that time to create these scientists who have an instance in which they fall into a swamp and emerge a different thing. Whether it is a man thing or a swamp thing. But technically, Swamp Thing as he exists right now is not Alec Holland as he was. He is, a lot of people thought he was just the mutated version of Alec Holland, but as I mentioned in the Floronic Man entry, he is a sentient mass of plant life that absorbed the memories of Alec Holland and the desire to help humanity, and that kind of distinguishes him from a lot of his counterparts in the DC universe, which specifically the second half of our number 2 nomination is the Parliament of Trees, because the kind of the Neil Gaiman reinvention and the Alan Moore Swamp Thing for a lot of these characters and their mythos is being tied. The introduction of the green, the red, the clear, the rot, all these other kind of consciousnesses that control elemental life. The Parliament of Trees is a huge deal. So technically the Parliament of Trees is a kind of a mindscape for notable plants. They kind of existed in Brazil, and they're the protectors of plant life. And among them are Iam or Iam, Swamp Knucker, which I know is a dragon, Bog Venus, Ghost hiding in the rushes, and more. And so it is this ancient kind of consciousness of trees. Each of them come from different regions of culture. I know Swamp Knucker's from Europe, and Ghost hiding in the rushes, I think, is from China. And so it's just this interesting idea that the plant life all throughout the universe connects, and Swamp Thing is their avatar. He speaks for the trees. Swamp Thing is their Lorax. But they were secretly pushing an agenda through him to eradicate humanity. But because of Swamp Thing's unique perspective on we need to maintain the balance between the green and the red, and then there's his daughter character kind of becomes a representative of both.
Right.
Swamp Thing refused to destroy the planet and protected humanity, and then the Parliament of Trees ended up being punished accordingly by a mystical force called the Word. And he's just a really cool character. I mean, we always see him as this shambling swamp creature, this shadowy figure who rises up from the muck. And he has been done in live action several times. There was a film and, of course, the 1 season, canceled too soon, DC Universe series. And he is chlorokinetic. And like we mentioned with Mantis, he can regrow himself from when he's damaged. Actually, with a lot of these characters, he can regrow himself, but he can transport his consciousness anywhere. He can affect alien plant life, and he can regrow himself. He can become gargantuan. The upward limits of his power haven't been explored, but basically, as infinite as nature is, he can become that strong. But the coolest thing is he can regrow himself from tiny, tiny little specks, and even from plant life that wasn't associated with his own body before. And most notably, or not most notably, but I think it's coolest, he was able to regrow a new body out of a little stash of tobacco that John Constantine had for rolling cigarettes.
Yeah.
And so he can on a molecular level be in control of plants and plant life, but then he can on like the macroscopic scale just become as gargantuan as he needs to be. I know there was an instance at which he was as big as a city block because he was just channeling the power of like sequoia trees and stuff.
Right.
So Swamp Thing and the Parliament of Trees, who they, even though they tried to kill all of humanity, they get the mention at number 2. And so yeah, and I think it's funny that Man Thing came first on both our list and in publication. So that's how you'll remember that forever and ever now. Is Man Thing and Swamp Thing very close to one another, but Man Thing came first, Swamp Thing came second. So without further ado, who could we have possibly left off this list up till
number one? It's number 1, and it is Groot. And of course it's Groot, especially with seeing him in the movies on the big screen. There's nothing like it. So Groot hails from Planet X, which is the capital of Branch Worlds. I just learned this looking it up.
Congratulations.
Thank you. He is an alien known as a Flora Colossus, and their language, like their skin, is rigid as bark. So due to their rigid internal organs, it seems that they only are able to repeat the phrase, "I am Groot." But there are subtle variations, and some heroes like Rocket Raccoon or Thor can understand him, whether it's just from being around him long enough or for taking classes on Grooties. I don't think that's the name of the language. But Groot is actually, despite his language barrier, he's hyper intelligent and incredibly creative with his powers and the powers of a flora colossus. So Groot is able to control all trees and plants and regenerate his own plant skin in any formation or density. He's able to create shields and vines to defend himself or others, or he can even create those bioluminescent
like the spores.
Yeah, the bioluminescent spores. And so with his hyper intelligence, he can be endlessly creative with all the things that he makes. And he's got an incredible regeneration ability that he can use on himself to grow in any direction or to any size. And he can also use that regeneration ability on other things and other plants to manipulate them however he wants to. And so while he can't necessarily transfer his consciousness, he can control the consciousness of the other plants around him. And so he's able to use all types of plants in whatever way, whether it's vines wrapping or the bioluminescent light, or even, poisonous plants, whatever it is, he can do it all. And he can make them all on his skin or from anywhere. And of course, he can regrow from even the smallest twig. And little baby Groot. I just love baby Groot.
I know. I don't think anyone was prepared for the introduction of baby Groot, and just how culturally significant he would become in such a short amount of time. I mean, interestingly enough, the Guardians of the Galaxy, as we see them in the films, didn't really exist before the early 2000s. And beyond that, the Guardians as a team in general was not a household name. And little fun fact, Groot was originally kind of a villain, but not he didn't fight the superheroes. He was kind of also in both Marvel and DC had their kind of Strange Tales or House of Secrets, those horror sci-fi books. And he could speak in full sentences. He was hyper intelligent, but also verbal, while he was this kind of tyrant monarch capturing humans.
Right.
But that's not fun.
Things change in comics.
Things change all the time, but I think most people prefer the new iteration of Groot, of course.
There's something so sweet about it and about him, and the perception of simplicity. When really he's got this incredible mind and he's an incredibly loyal friend, and he's got incredible powers. I
was gonna say, I don't think the same can be said for baby Groot, though. He's hyper intelligent. Don't press that button.
Yeah, well, I think James Gunn actually confirmed at some point that is actually Groot's son, not actually the original Groot.
Son of Groot.
Son of Groot. That would be a different thing for him to say.
Well, and I think that's just a testament to all of these characters. Most everyone we mentioned on this list has some ability to regrow themselves, to regrow the damaged parts of the earth, and whether or not they're using their powers for evil or good, it is just a cool thing to see that they can heal the hurt that humanity does cause, whether inadvertently or on purpose, to the natural balance. And I think that it's good to have people who champion for nature, and so you don't always agree with Poison Ivy's methods, but the idea is there. But yeah, to see these characters, and they can, even in a metaphorical sense, regrow from adversity. Even if you yourself are just the tiniest speck of what you thought you were earlier, you can get up and regrow and just kind of flourish wherever you're planted.
With enough nurturing, I think so.
So, to recap our list, number 10 is Clara Prast from Marvel Comics. Number 9 is the White Mercy from DC Comics. Number 8 is Plant Man from Marvel Comics. Number 7 is Mantis from Marvel Comics. Number 6 is Floronic Man from DC Comics. Number 5 is Krakoa from Marvel Comics. Number 4 is Poison Ivy from DC Comics. Number 3 is Man-Thing from Marvel Comics. Number 2 is Swamp Thing and the Parliament of Trees from DC Comics. And number 1 is Groot from Marvel Comics. So did we cultivate a strong growing list, or did we forget to water this one? If we missed someone that you think should be on the list, be sure to check out our blog and send us your opinions at podcasts@sideshow.com. And that was our top 10 plant-powered comic book characters. Do you enjoy the Geek Culture Countdown? We are proud to bring you pop culture content completely ad-free, but that doesn't mean we don't need your support to help keep us going. Please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform and help spread the word about our podcast. We welcome fan feedback. Email us at podcasts@sideshow.com with your thoughts and suggestions for how we can make our shows even better. Plus, tune in for our other pop culture podcasts. See your favorite comic and film characters evolve across 2 generations in the bi-weekly Then and Now podcast. Hear exclusive interviews with celebrities and pop culture industry leaders as they let their geek side show in Look Who Showed Up. Then get all the latest pop culture news with our daily briefing, a 2-minute breakdown of all the biggest geek headlines perfect for your Alexa or Google News briefings. We wouldn't exist without your continued support. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to let your geek side show.